It started with a scream that nobody heard on a damp October night when the streets of Grayford were nearly empty and the rain washed the silence clean. A young woman ran barefoot down an alleyway, her skin streaked with dirt, her breath ragged like torn fabric. She banged on doors, desperate, crying for help, but each house was locked, each curtain drawn. By the time a passing taxi driver noticed her, she was gone, swallowed into the darkness like she had never existed. For weeks afterward, the people of Grayford whispered about the girl. Some said she had been drunk. Others claimed she was an addict, hallucinating on the streets. But one old man swore he heard her scream, echoing across the rooftops that night. The police opened a case, yes, but quietly, carefully, as if they didn't want to stir something they couldn't control. My name is Daniel Price. I was a journalist back then, freelancing for whoever paid on time. When I first read about the case, I thought it was just another missing person story. Grayford wasn't a big city, but it wasn't safe either. People vanished. Drugs and poverty did their damage. It was sad, but not unusual. At least that's what I told myself. But then I got a call from someone I had never met. Her voice was shaking, broken, almost like she was whispering from inside a closet. "You're looking into the girl, aren't you?" she said. I paused. "Who is this?" "I can't say. They'll hear me, but if you want the truth, you have to come to Grayford. You have to see the house." And then she hung up. I don't know why, but those words crawled under my skin and stayed there. You have to see the house. It played over and over in my head until I couldn't sleep. A week later, I packed my bag, took my recorder, my camera, and my old notebook, and I drove to Grayford. The town looked worse than I expected. Rows of abandoned shops, paint peeling off the walls, empty playgrounds with broken swings that creaked when the wind pushed them. And then there were the people, watchful, nervous, their eyes darting to the shadows as if they knew something was moving there. At the local diner, I asked about the girl. The waitress froze when I mentioned her. "Best not talk about that," she muttered. "People disappear all the time here. That's just how it is." But this was different, wasn't it? I pressed. Her lips tightened. She leaned closer and whispered, "Don't go near Holloway House. Nothing good ever comes out of there." Then she turned and walked away, refusing to serve me another word. That was the first time I heard the name. Holloway House, a crumbling Victorian building on the edge of town, hidden behind a row of skeletal trees. I drove past it that same night. Even from the road, I could feel it. The house stood tall but rotting, its windows black holes, its roof sagging. The front gate leaned sideways, the iron twisted as though something had bent it with bare hands. And inside the windows, I swear I saw movement. Not people exactly, but shifting shadows that didn't match the trees or the moonlight. I sat in my car for almost half an hour, engine running, staring at that place. A voice in my head kept saying, "Turn back, leave now, forget this story." But something stronger, something I can't explain, pulled me toward it. And so I stayed. That night, I checked into the only motel in town, a filthy little place with buzzing lights and water-stained walls. As I unpacked, I noticed the window in my room wouldn't shut properly. The lock was broken. I stuffed a chair under the handle, telling myself it was enough. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of scratching, not from outside, but from inside the room. The scratching was faint at first, like nails brushing against wood. I lay frozen, ears straining, heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. For a moment, I told myself it was just rats in the walls or branches tapping the glass. But then I remembered the motel window didn't close properly, and the sound was coming from inside the room. I slowly turned my head toward the corner near the dresser. The dim yellow light from the street lamp outside spilled just far enough to reveal the old wooden drawers. And there it was, something shifting. The bottom drawer trembled, then jerked open by an inch. Every hair on my body stood on end. My throat went dry, but I forced myself out of bed, grabbing the heavy flashlight I always carried in my bag. I held it like a weapon and took one slow step toward the dresser. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then, as I leaned closer, the drawer suddenly slid open all the way, slamming against the wood with a crack that echoed through the small room. I nearly dropped the flashlight. Inside, there was nothing. Nothing but crumpled motel stationery and dust. But the air smelled different now. Sour, damp, like something rotten that had been left underground for too long. I closed the drawer quickly and backed away, never taking my eyes off it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had imagined it, that I was just on edge from the drive, the town's atmosphere, the things people whispered. But when I checked out, the motel owner, an old woman with cloudy eyes, stopped me at the desk. "You heard them, didn't you?" she asked softly. I froze. "What are you talking about?" Her lips twitched into something between a smile and a grimace. "They like new blood. Don't let them follow you." Before I could ask what she meant, she handed me my receipt and turned away, refusing to meet my gaze again. I left the motel shaken, but more determined. The story was bigger than a missing girl. It was festering in this town, creeping in the walls, whispering through the cracks, and all of it circled back to Holloway House. I spent the day digging old newspapers in the town library, dusty records nobody cared about anymore. The Holloway family had once been wealthy, owners of a textile mill that gave Grayford its brief moment of prosperity in the 1800s. But tragedy stalked them, children dying young, workers vanishing from the mill, fires that destroyed whole wings of the house. By 1923, the family was gone, every last one of them dead under strange circumstances. The house had been left to rot, except it didn't stay empty. In the 60s, a group of squatters lived there. They lasted 3 months before one of them was found hanging from the rafters, his face twisted in terror. In the 80s, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night. 2 of them never came back. And now, decades later, the missing girl, everything, the whispers, the fear, the silence, it all pointed to that house. That evening, I drove back out to the edge of town. Holloway House looked even worse in daylight, if that was possible. Its paint peeled like shedding skin. The porch sagged under its own weight, and the trees around it leaned inward as though nature itself wanted to bury the place. I parked across the street and watched. Hours passed. Nothing, just wind through dead leaves, the occasional crow, the groan of wood settling. But as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched, I saw it again. Movement. In the upstairs window, a figure stood. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. A person. Tall, thin, motionless, watching me. I gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles ached. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, didn't shift, just stood there, staring, And then, in the glass, I realized its head was bent at the wrong angle, twisted slightly too far to one side. By the time I blinked, the window was empty. That night, I didn't return to the motel. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my car outside the diner, scribbling notes in my journal, trying to decide if I was losing my mind or uncovering something real. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, I answered, voice low. Hello. The same broken whisper I'd heard before. You went to the house, didn't you? My throat tightened. Who is this? They know you now, she whispered. They'll come. Don't let them touch you. And then the line went dead. I sat frozen in the dark, my phone still pressed to my ear, my breath fogging the glass. That was when I heard it. A tap. From the back seat of my car. The tap was so soft, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Just the echo of nerves rattling around in my skull. But then it came again, a sharp, deliberate tap right behind my shoulder. I froze. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white, throat dry. Slowly, with every nerve screaming at me not to, I turned my head toward the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing, just the back seat, dimly lit by the pale glow of the diner's neon sign outside, the cracked vinyl, the old coffee cup rolling near the floor mat, empty. But then, movement, a smear of darkness, shifted in the reflection, sliding across the seat like ink in water. No shape, no face, just a presence. Wrong, heavy, pressing against my chest, even though it wasn't touching me. My body moved before my brain did. I threw the door open, stumbled out into the night air, and spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand. The back seat was empty, nothing there, but the car smelled like the motel drawer, damp, rotting, suffocating. I backed away, heart hammering. People at the diner were watching me now. A couple of truckers smoking by the door, a waitress with tired eyes wiping the counter. None of them said a word. They just stared, like they knew, like they'd seen this before. I couldn't stay in the car, not with that smell, not with that thing. So I grabbed my bag, my recorder, and booked a room at a different place, an inn on the far side of town, newer, cleaner, with lights that actually worked. But safety was an illusion. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hall, slow, dragging, the kind of footsteps that don't care if you hear them, because they know you can't escape. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. The steps stopped outside my door. Silence. Then came a low creak, like someone pressing their weight against the wood. The handle rattled once, twice, then slowly turned. I lunged from the bed, grabbed the chair, and shoved it under the handle just as the door pressed inward. My whole body trembled as the door strained against me, the chair legs squealing on the floor. Whoever or whatever was outside didn't push hard. It was worse than that. It pushed just enough to let me know it was real, and then it stopped. The handle released. The weight lifted. Footsteps drifted away, fading into nothing. I didn't sleep again. I sat awake until the first thin line of dawn crawled across the curtains. When I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, but carved into the wood, right at eye level, were three words scratched deep and ragged. See the house. By then, I knew there was no escaping this. Whoever had called me, whatever had followed me, it all led back to Holloway House. That evening, I drove there again, this time armed with my recorder, a fresh notebook, and every ounce of fear I had. The front gate groaned as I pushed it open. The yard was wild, weeds strangling the path. The fountain in the center cracked and dry. The air felt heavy, thicker than normal, as though the house itself was breathing. When I stepped onto the porch, the wood moaned beneath my boots. The door loomed ahead, swollen with age, its paint flaking like dead skin. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. It was unlocked. The door swung inward with a sound that didn't belong to wood or rust. It was wetter, hungrier, like flesh tearing. Inside, the house was colder than outside, the air sharp enough to sting my lungs. The hallway stretched before me, lined with broken mirrors and peeling wallpaper, patterned with roses that had faded into gray shadows. My flashlight beam trembled as I swept it across the walls. Every mirror was cracked, and in every shard, I didn't see my reflection. I saw someone else's, a girl, her eyes wide, her mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear, her skin pale, almost blue, like she'd been dead for hours. It was her, the missing girl. My hand shook so badly, the flashlight slipped from my grip and clattered onto the floor. In that moment, all the mirrors went black, swallowing her image, and somewhere deep inside the house, something began to move. The sound came from somewhere upstairs, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing the length of a room with heavy boots. I stood frozen in the hallway, every nerve screaming to run, but my legs rooted to the floor. The air felt thicker now, sticky, as though the house itself had sealed around me. I forced myself to pick up the flashlight. Though my hand trembled so badly, the beam quivered across the walls. Hello? My voice cracked, sounding smaller than I meant it to. Is anyone here? No answer. Just the pacing above me, steady, unhurried, like it knew I was listening. I moved forward, deeper into the hall. The wooden floor groaned under my weight, dust swirling in the flashlight's beam. On the walls, the faded rose wallpaper seemed to peel in patterns, curling like skeletal fingers, reaching out. To my right was a parlor. The furniture inside was draped in filthy sheets, but the shape of it was wrong, slumped and hunched, as if the chairs themselves were alive. My light passed over the fireplace, and that's when I saw it, scrawled into the soot-blackened bricks in jagged letters. Help us. The pacing stopped. The silence that followed pressed down so hard it rang in my ears. I turned back toward the staircase. The beam landed on the first step, stained darker than the rest, almost black, as if something had soaked into it long ago. I told myself it was just water damage, but in my gut, I knew better. Step by step, I climbed. The railing was sticky, tacky against my palm, though when I pulled my hand away, there was no residue, just that smell again. Damp, rotten, like the motel drawer, like the car. Halfway up, the sound returned, not pacing now, breathing, low, guttural, ragged. Coming from the landing above me, I froze, my heart hammering so loudly I thought it would echo through the walls. I forced the flashlight upward. At the top of the stairs stood a figure, the girl, the one from the mirrors. Her eyes were wide, rimmed red, her lips parted as though she were about to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, her jaw slackened, dropping further, too far, until it hung unnaturally low. A wet snap echoed in the silence as her head twisted to the side, bending just like the figure I had seen in the window. The beam shook wildly in my grip. Jesus Christ, I blinked, and she was gone. Just empty hallway. But the breathing continued. I reached the landing, legs trembling so badly I thought they'd give way. To my left was a long hallway of doors, each one cracked open, just an inch. To my right, a single door stood wide, leading into what must have been a bedroom. The breathing came from there. I stepped inside. The bedroom was ruined, curtains torn, mattress collapsed inward, wallpaper curling from the damp. My light scanned across the dresser, the broken bed frame, the shattered glass on the floor, and then I saw the photographs, dozens of them scattered across the floor and pinned to the walls with rusted nails, all black and white, all of the Holloway family, smiling, stiff, Victorian faces staring blankly at the camera, except in each photo, in the background, barely visible in the shadows, there was the girl, not the family, not the children, the same girl I'd seen in the mirrors, watching, waiting. My stomach twisted. These photos had to be over a century old. She couldn't be in them. It wasn't possible. A whisper broke the silence, so close it felt like it came from the inside of my skull. Help me. The voice was hers. I spun, light slicing through the room, and for a split second, I saw her again, kneeling in the corner, hands clasped together, eyes begging. And then something yanked the flashlight from my hand. The room plunged into darkness. Behind me, the breathing grew louder, closer. I couldn't see, but I could feel it, pressing against my skin, creeping into my lungs, wrapping around my throat like invisible hands. The breathing behind me deepened, wet and rattling, as though whoever, or whatever, stood there had drowned long ago. I stumbled backward, hands outstretched, searching for anything. My foot caught on the broken bed frame, and I crashed onto the floor, shards of glass biting into my palms. The stench of rot grew stronger, suffocating, as if the walls themselves exhaled decay. Then came the whisper, right next to my ear. You shouldn't have come. I scrambled blindly, fingertips grazing across photographs strewn on the floor. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. The air grew colder, heavy enough to make each breath burn. And then, fingers, cold, damp, impossibly long fingers brushed against the back of my neck. I roared in panic, swinging wildly. My hand struck something solid. Shoulder, arm, I don't know, but it gave way with a sickening snap, like brittle wood breaking. A shriek filled the room, high-pitched and inhuman, rattling the glass shards on the floor. I crawled toward the faint outline of the door, lungs heaving, and burst into the hallway. My hand slammed the wall until I found the flashlight, its beam flickering weakly as it rolled near the baseboard. I grabbed it and swung it behind me. Nothing, just the empty bedroom. But the photographs, they were gone, every single one. I staggered back, my chest heaving, sweat dripping down my face despite the freezing air. I didn't care about notes anymore, didn't care about the recorder. All I wanted was to get out. I bolted down the hallway, feet thundering against warped floorboards. Doors on either side rattled as I passed, slamming shut one by one as if the house itself was hurting me forward. The last door at the end of the hall stood wide open. I didn't want to go in, but the floor behind me cracked loudly, splinters flying upward like something heavy had landed there. I sprinted, dove into the room, and slammed the door shut, shoving a wardrobe in front of it with shaking arms. The room was small, circular, with a single, cracked window looking out over the dead yard. Moonlight spilled in, weak and pale, painting everything in sick gray, and in the center of the room, a circle drawn into the floorboards, etched deep into the wood, symbols I didn't recognize, sharp and curling, like letters from an alphabet older than anything I'd ever seen. Dark stains filled the grooves, stains that could only have been blood. Inside the circle, burned into the floor, was a shape, a body, or rather, the outline of one. Arms splayed, legs bent at impossible angles, head twisted. I dropped to my knees, shining the light closer. The outline was small, a child. My stomach lurched. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my body stayed locked, transfixed by the horror in front of me. That's when the scratching began. From inside the circle, the wood bulged, cracking along the lines of the symbols, as though something underneath was clawing its way out. Splinters rained upward, the sound sharp and frantic, the boards shaking beneath my knees. I staggered back, flashlight beam bouncing wildly, when the wardrobe behind me rattled hard, once, twice, then flew forward, crashing across the room as the door blasted open. The girl was there, her pale face twisted, her mouth still hanging wide, but her eyes begged me. She lifted a trembling hand and pointed at the circle. "Stop them," she whispered, and then she was yanked backward by invisible hands, dragged into the dark hall, her nails leaving gouges in the wood until she vanished. The scratching grew louder, and from the circle in the floor, a low, guttural growl rose. Not human, not even close. The growl vibrated through the floorboards, deep and animalistic, yet layered with something that felt almost human, like a chorus of voices buried in the sound, wailing inside the rumble. My stomach twisted as the circle bulged upward, wood snapping apart like ribs cracking open. I stumbled back toward the cracked window, shining the flashlight into the center of the room. The beam caught movement, black, glistening, slick as though covered in oil. Fingers, or something like fingers, slid through the cracks. Too long, too many, clawing for purchase as they pulled something larger upward. The room stank of sulfur and rot, a wave so thick it made me gag. My throat closed, tears burning my eyes. The growling turned to wet gasps, as if the thing beneath the floor was drowning, clawing for air, and for me. I should have run, should have smashed the window and leapt into the dead garden below, but I couldn't. Something rooted me in place, and then, her voice, the girl, soft, desperate, almost a sob. "Don't let it out. Please." I spun, but she wasn't there, only her voice, echoing inside the room. The circle split wide. A head forced its way through the boards, bent, hairless, slick with black tar that dripped onto the floor in fat drops. Its jaw split too wide, unhinging with a crack, rows of teeth like shards of broken glass glistening in the beam. It wasn't human. It wasn't even close. I staggered back, fumbling in my bag, pulling out my recorder. My instincts as a journalist clung to me even in that moment. I needed proof. My hands shook as I pressed record, my own voice trembling. "This is Daniel Price, inside Holloway House. Something's here. It's..." The creature's eyes snapped open. Not eyes exactly. Sockets, filled with blackness. But deep in the void, something pulsed red, glowing faint like embers in dying coal. And when it looked at me, my chest tightened so violently I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The voice came not from its mouth, but from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from inside my skull. You opened the door. The flashlight flickered. My recorder screeched with static, the tape warping with distorted whispers. I dropped it, clutching my head as the sound clawed inside. You hear us. You see us. You belong. The boards split wider. Its arms, if you could call them arms, pulled upward, jointless, slick, writhing like snakes, yet ending in hands with too many fingers. Each digit clawed the air, scraping at the walls, leaving black streaks that burned like acid. I screamed, staggered back, and threw myself against the window. The glass cracked, but didn't give. Again, I smashed my flashlight against it, shards exploding outward, the cold night air flooding in. Behind me, the thing dragged itself higher, its jaw stretching open in a grin that didn't belong to this world. I climbed onto the sill, legs shaking, lungs burning. The voice boomed inside my skull one last time, a chorus of agony and rage. We are not finished. And then I jumped. The fall knocked the air out of me. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting up my leg. But I didn't stop. I crawled, scrambled to my feet, and stumbled into the yard, branches tearing at my arms as I pushed through the weeds. Behind me, the house groaned, not like wood, but like something alive, a roar, low, furious, and endless, shook the air as every window shattered at once, glass raining into the dead grass around me. The night swallowed the sound, leaving only my ragged breaths and the pounding of my heart. I didn't look back, not once. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, fumbling the keys with trembling hands, blood dripping from my palms where the glass had cut me. When the engine roared to life, I peeled away, gravel spitting under the tires, Holloway House shrinking in my rear view. But even as I sped down the empty road, one thought gnawed at me, sharper than the fear, sharper than the pain. The girl hadn't wanted me to free it. She wanted me to stop it. And now, it was loose. I drove until my hands cramped on the steering wheel, and my eyes burned from exhaustion. The road stretched empty for miles, the night pressing close on all sides. Every shadow looked like it wanted to step into my headlights. Every shape on the roadside bent just a little too much toward the car. When I finally pulled into a gas station outside Grayford, I collapsed against the wheel. The clock on the dashboard glowed 4:12 a.m. My body screamed for rest, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. Not with that thing free. I stumbled inside the station, blood dried on my palms, clothes streaked with dirt. The cashier, a young guy with headphones around his neck, froze when he saw me. "You okay, man?" he asked cautiously. I tried to answer, but my throat was raw, my voice shredded. All I managed was, "Holloway House." The color drained from his face. He looked at me for a long second, then leaned across the counter, lowering his voice. "You went in there." I nodded, trembling. He shook his head, muttering something I couldn't catch. Then louder, "You need to talk to Father Mercer." "Who?" I croaked. "The priest. He's been warning people about that place for years. Nobody listens." He scribbled an address on a receipt and shoved it into my hand. "If you want answers, he's the only one who'll give 'em." I left with shaking legs, gripping the paper so tight it wrinkled in my fist. Father Mercer lived in a crumbling rectory near the edge of town, a tall man with hollow eyes that seemed to have already seen the worst the world could offer. When he opened the door, his gaze flicked over me once, and he sighed. You went inside, he said flatly. I swallowed hard. What's in there? He stepped aside, letting me in without another word. The rectory smelled of dust and candle wax, shelves lined with old books and yellowed papers. He motioned me to sit while he poured tea into chipped cups. The Holloways weren't just mill owners, he began. They were dabblers, summoners. They believed suffering could be harvested, pain as currency, blood as a doorway. I stared at him, cold spreading through my chest. You're saying they. What? Made that thing? He nodded. They opened a passage. Whatever you saw, it wasn't meant to be here. They bound it to the house. But bindings weaken, time erodes them. Every soul lost there only feeds it. Every cry for help strengthens its grip. I thought of the girl, the way she appeared, always begging, always pointing me toward the circle. But the girl, she's not like it. She's trying to stop it. Father Mercer's eyes darkened. That girl is many. She's every victim that's been swallowed by the house, every voice screaming in the dark. The creature wears them like masks. It knows how to lure the curious, the desperate. Sometimes it mimics their pain to draw you in. My stomach twisted. No, she begged me to help her. She warned me. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a rasp. Or maybe it let you believe that. Maybe it wanted you there, wanted you to open what it couldn't. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room swayed, the memory of the circle flashing behind my eyes, the girl's pale hand pointing. Stop them. Had I been tricked? Before I could answer, a thunderous crack split the air. The rectory windows shook, glass rattling in their frames. Father Mercer shot to his feet, face pale. It's here. The lights flickered. The air thickened, choking. From the hallway came a sound I'll never forget. Children's laughter, high and sharp, warped into something jagged. I backed toward the door. Father, what do we... He grabbed a wooden crucifix from the wall, knuckles white around it. We end what should have never begun. Upstairs. Now, we thundered up the stairs as the walls groaned, cracks racing across the plaster like veins. Behind us, the laughter turned to screams. In his study, Mercer rifled through drawers until he pulled out a leather-bound book, its pages brittle with age. Strange symbols filled the margins, curling lines like the ones etched into the floor of Holloway House. He shoved it into my hands. This is the ritual. It's the only way to seal it again, but it must be done inside the house. My heart dropped. You're saying I have to go back? He met my eyes, grim and unflinching. If you don't, the house won't contain it anymore, and Grayford won't be the end. It'll spread, town to town, soul to soul. A crash shook the walls. The lights died. From the staircase below, heavy footsteps climbed toward us. Slow, patient, relentless. Mercer raised the crucifix, voice firm though his hand shook. Go. I'll hold it here as long as I can. You run. I clutched the book to my chest, every instinct screaming to refuse, to fight, to stay. But the footsteps grew louder, the air grew colder, and when I looked at the priest's face, I knew he wasn't asking. He was sacrificing. I ran, down the back stairs, into the freezing night. Book pressed to my ribs like a lifeline. Behind me, the rectory shook with thunderous roars, glass exploding outward as something vast and furious tore through the walls. I didn't look back. The Holloway House loomed in the distance, black against the horizon, waiting. The road to Holloway House felt longer this time, though I drove like the devil himself was behind me. Maybe he was. The book sat on the passenger seat, its cracked leather warm as if it pulsed with its own heartbeat. Every mile closer, the air thickened, the sky darker, though dawn was only hours away. When the house came into view, I almost turned back. It was alive. The walls seemed to shift and breathe, windows glowing faintly with a sick red light. The trees around it bent inward, like worshippers at a shrine, their skeletal branches clawing toward the roof. I parked at the edge of the dead yard and stepped out, book clutched tight, my breath fogging in the unnatural cold. The earth beneath me was soft, spongy, like it had been fed too much blood. Every step toward the door felt heavier, as if the ground wanted to drag me down. The front door was wide open, waiting. I stepped inside. The house groaned in recognition, boards creaking under my boots, air humming with low whispers that slipped between the walls. The girl appeared almost instantly at the foot of the staircase, pale and trembling. "Don't," she begged, her voice breaking. "It's too late." I froze. The priest's words rang in my ears. The creature wears them like masks. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. They just hung there, glistening, unmoving. Too perfect, too wrong. "You're not her," I whispered. Her face twisted into a grin, jaw splitting wider than a human's should. And then she was gone. The book shook in my hands, pages fluttering, though there was no wind. My flashlight beam caught the stairs, leading up to that room with the circle. My legs felt like stone, but I forced them upward. At the landing, the stench hit me. Sulfur, rot, smoke, all choking, all wrong. And from the open room came a sound that made my blood freeze. Screaming. Not one voice, hundreds. Men, women, children, all shrieking, begging, howling in pain. The walls trembled with it, the boards pulsing like veins. I stepped into the room. The circle was wide open now. The floor shattered. The thing from below had risen halfway into the room, its body an endless mass of limbs, torsos, faces stretched and fused together, each one screaming silently. It was a mountain of stolen flesh, writhing, dripping black tar that hissed as it ate through the wood. It saw me. The red embers inside its sockets flared, my body convulsed, knees buckling, heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The book nearly slipped from my hands, but then, beneath the roar, I heard a single voice. The girl. "Read it." My hands shook as I opened the book. Symbols crawled across the page, shifting, alive. But my mouth began to form the words anyway. The language was jagged, burning my throat with every syllable. The air rippled, the house screamed, the creature shrieked, its mass thrashing, the faces in its body wailing louder. Limbs reached for me. Too many, too fast, clawing at the floor, the walls, the ceiling. One nearly grazed my leg, leaving a streak of black that smoked against my jeans. I kept reading, louder now, though blood filled my mouth. The words weren't just sounds, they were knives, slicing into me as much as into it. The circle reignited, the symbols blazing red, the floor cracked, splitting wide, pulling the creature back down. It roared, hundreds of mouths screaming as the house shook around us, dust and wood raining from the ceiling. I screamed the final word, every ounce of breath tearing from my lungs. The circle blazed white, blinding, and then silence. The house groaned one last time before collapsing inward. Walls caved, windows shattered, the roof folding into itself. I dove through the doorway as the entire structure came down, the ground trembling under the weight of centuries of rot. When the dust settled, Holloway House was gone, nothing but rubble and a crater of ash. I lay on the ground, gasping, body broken, mind shredded. The book was gone, burned to nothing in the blast of light, and then, across the wreckage, I saw her, the girl. She stood among the ruins, her face no longer twisted, no longer pale. She smiled faintly, eyes calm for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone. The wind howled through the broken trees. The town was silent. It was over. Or at least, I wanted to believe it was, because sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and my mind drifts back to that house, I hear it again. A whisper. You opened the door.